Cystic fibrosis can be a devastating diagnosis, but living with the disease can bring positivity and a new appreciation for each day. From the Bonnell Foundation in Detroit, Michigan, it's the Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast. Nothing on the Bonnell Foundation Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast should be considered medical advice. Medical advice can only come from your CF physician. Here's your host, Laura Bonnell.
I'm Laura Bonnell, and my daughters and our family have been living with cystic fibrosis for 24 years, since my oldest, Molly, was born, followed by her younger sister, Emily. And I'm joined by two other moms today who either raised or are raising children with CF, and I'll introduce them to you in a minute. First, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about myself, and then we can talk about the mothers that have children with CF and what we face on the day-to-day. So my husband has 7 siblings, and I have 2 siblings, and we never knew that we carried the gene that causes cystic fibrosis. And in case you're listening and don't know what cystic fibrosis is, it's a genetic disease that causes chronic and fatal lung infections and interferes with digestion and just about every organ in the body. A thick, sticky mucus fills the body, causing these infections. Right now, there's no cure, but there are a lot of medications that are allowing people to live longer with this disease. Right now, the average life expectancy is about 41 years old, and there are approximately 1,700 different mutations of cystic fibrosis, and my daughters have 2 mutations. So doctors and scientists have to find the correct medication that will help specific people with CF based on their mutation. And the way the doctor explained it to us was, my daughters have a window and a door that needs to be opened by the medications. So right now they're closed. And once they find the correct medication, which is actually in phase 3 right now, then it will help them live a better life. It's still not a cure, but it will correct the disease in their bodies. So we didn't really know anything about cystic fibrosis when this all started. I knew that I wanted to be a news reporter since I was 12 years old, and that's what I've done throughout college and my entire career, except for 1 year that I actually took a year off, and I just see it as my destiny. I worked at the Washtenaw United Way for 1 year doing public relations, and I helped promote the agencies that were under the United Way umbrella, and that was helping the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. And so I was in a lab at University of Michigan with Jeff, who had CF. He was 24 years old. And Dr. Francis Collins was also in this lab. And, I'm working in there. We're doing this little spread for the newspaper. And the gene was discovered that causes cystic fibrosis. And Dr. Collins was one of the doctors that discovered the gene. And so the agency I was working for said, well, you need to be there for that news conference, make sure they say everything we want them to. But U of M had their own PR people, but I was just there with the United Way. So I was dating my now husband. I didn't know I had the CF gene at the time. But like I said, I really feel that it was my destiny. So WWJ, where I work, gave me the voice to raise awareness about cystic fibrosis. Everything just came together. So we get married. We have a daughter with cystic fibrosis. The doctors, friends didn't even believe that our daughter Molly had CF. They're like, oh, you're a first-time mom. Just, go back to work. Everything's fine. So I kept reading, and I knew that she had CF. So I demanded, or asked politely, but I said to the doctor, I need her tested for CF right now. I know she has it. She's 3 months old. I know she has it. So they said, okay, just to, pacify you, we'll test her. They did the test. I was on a breaking news story. I have no recollection of where I was going that day, but they called me and said, pull over. And I said, I already know. I know she has it. So we went home. I called my husband. I'm like, meet me at home. We cried for that day, had a beer, and then said, well, what are we going to do now? Because we just have to move forward. This is our life. We're going to make it a positive one. Joe has so many siblings, and I had 2 brothers. We're like, oh my gosh, what about a second child? We'll talk about that later. But those were the initial thoughts that we had when Molly was diagnosed. But we decided then and there, that very first day, that we had to be positive. Had to raise them to live life, because otherwise, what was the point? So now I'm going to bring in 2 other moms. All of us have very different experiences, just like everyone does. Samantha has a son, Ethan, who is her middle child, and he was diagnosed at 4 weeks old. And then Kim had a daughter who was born August of 1987. She was diagnosed at 12 weeks, Margaret, and she lost her battle with cystic fibrosis when she was 31 years old. I just wanted to start by welcoming both moms. Samantha, we'll start with you. What were your first thoughts when your son was diagnosed with CF, and did you know you carried the gene?
I did not know I carried the gene, but I had suspected something was not quite right. I mean, I was terrified at first, worried, but I gave myself like 2 days, and then I put on my mama bear pants and we started the fight. So it was pretty much all we could do.
And was it discovered in the newborn screening or no?
It was, but the hospital that we had him at didn't send the results of the newborn screen right away. So we could have found out a couple weeks earlier, but because they forgot to send the results, then we got a call randomly. Why haven't you got him tested yet? And that was, I knew something was wrong. So that call right there was like my validation that my mama gut was right, that something was wrong. So, but yeah, it was initially through the newborn screen.
And newborn screening, in case people don't know, your infant is tested for Tay-Sachs and sickle cell. Recently, within the last, I think it is 10 years, for cystic fibrosis, it wasn't tested for before. So if you didn't know, you would not have had your child tested. It's like in our case, 24 years ago, we had no idea. But now, fortunately, they do test. And the other thing to bring up is there are cystic fibrosis clinics throughout the country. So it's very important to go to a CF clinic when your child's diagnosed, because I've heard many stories of children who go to non-CF clinics and either they're misdiagnosed or they're not treated the way that they need to be treated with medications. And now, Kim, tell us what happened when Margaret was diagnosed.
Well, when Margaret was diagnosed, there was no test at the hospitals. Plus, I had Margaret at home with a midwife. So when she presented, it was a real different presentation, and the doctors really had a big puzzle on their hands. But by 12 weeks, we did find out that she had CF. And like Samantha, I had that mama bear feeling that something quite wasn't right. Had the doctors out, and I actually thought at one point they were going to take her away because she was presenting with internal bruising, which is very, very unusual and probably won't happen to most people.
And a lot of infants that are born with cystic fibrosis also have blockage, bowel obstruction.
Yeah.
So that's one of the signs too, prior to there being some newborn screening. So I'm wondering, Kim, how did your family respond? Did you have a lot of support? How did things go at the beginning?
I had a wonderful family and quite a bit of support. We actually went down as a group and had a conference with the doctor, and we had over 30 people there. The doctor was pretty impressed. However, there were a lot of smokers in the family. The doctor very nicely said to all of them there when they said, "What can we do to help?" The first thing he said was, "Don't smoke around this child." Now, that became problematic over the years, but by and large, as they saw the different effects that it would have on her, I actually had to leave a few family gatherings before it really hit them, especially in the dead of winter when it's really cold. They would try going off into a room or something. But they stopped, and most of the family that didn't smoke wanted a stand-up version of Maggie as a baby so they could put it at all the parties that she wasn't at because they just didn't like smoking back then. So that was over 30 years ago.
And something else I have to say, as I was thinking of this is the first time we've ever met in person, and the three of us have ever been in the same room. And it's so wonderful, and we're just getting to know one another. But one of the toughest things about CF is that our kids can't be in the same room because of the bacteria that's in their lungs and the cross-contamination. And I think it's hard. I think one of the benefits my girls have had is each other, because they both have CF and they understand it. But I just think it's one of the hardest things because these kids can't be together. And now, of course, social media, there's groups and they can talk to each other and everything. But
in Michigan, there used to be a camp for children with cystic fibrosis. And after 25 years, the doctors realized they were actually spreading really bad bacteria to each other and getting each other sicker at camp. They were able to trace it right back, and they had to cancel it. Maggie was 9 years old when that happened. She'd been to camp twice, and it was devastating for the CF community. But they've recovered. They've recovered really well with social media.
Yeah.
So I see a lot of positives.
And I think
there.
in part because of that camp, now they have many more precautions. When you go in waiting rooms, you're not sitting with other people with CF and everything. The rooms are much cleaner and everything like that. But Samantha, back to you. So how did your family respond?
They were all really supportive. I mean, there was the fear at first, like not knowing how to act, what we should do, how to treat him. But after we got our routine and all that down, I mean, we just have a wonderful support system. So it's been nice.
And we did have a wonderful, and still do have a wonderful support system. But there are some funny stories in the beginning when friends would come over with their kids and they would have a fever of like 102. Yeah, I didn't think it was a big deal. You wouldn't bring your child with a fever to any party. But so we were like, no, really, you have to leave. You really, really have to go.
That's fun.
So, I mean, it's funny looking back on it. It was actually kind of sort of funny at that time because, it's a learning process. Everybody didn't understand. You're worried if they're going to get a cold, and that's going to be a problem. So it is a learning experience. Kim, I want to start with you because I think in Margaret's 31 years, we talked a little bit, but she has died, and it's almost been a year now, right?
Yeah, February 1st.
But tell us about the gifts, about the treasures and the memories, or the sarcasm between the two of you, whatever you saw as, wow, this is...
Oh, we learned to love Maggie, and we didn't refrain from teaching her about cystic fibrosis. And with all of the routines, we told her, you have to fight every day for your life. That's just kind of a mantra that we had for her. But other than that, with the different routines that we had to do as far as a medical regimen, we let her do pretty much anything she wanted to growing up. If she wanted to play in the sandbox, she played in the sandbox. She rode a donkey one time with a pick line in. I did call, uncle on that. My friends did that. And I said, no, they'll take her away. You can't let her get that dirty. But there were very few restrictions on her. And she actually started traveling at 11 years old by herself. I know that's very controversial, but I made sure that somebody was watching her. I paid the extra money airfare. I made sure someone was going to be there. And she ended up going to Africa. She went to Germany. She went all over the place. Now, when she went to Africa, she went with the doctor's permission, and also Germany. She went with the doctor's permission. So they were ready to intervene at the drop of a hat. But she was there for 10 weeks. She just had a wonderful life. She learned how to, I don't want to say skydive. It's the other.
Parasailing?
Yeah, parasailing. Okay. Yeah, she learned how to do that. And got her number 1 pilot license. Apparently, if you just go up it, you get that. There's 5 stages to pilots. She found that she didn't want to continue that because she was a little bit older, and at that point, she was starting to just stop a little bit. But she did all the rivers. She did the whitewater rafting. I mean, she was really an adventurous young woman, and we applauded everything that she did. We were so proud of her. I can stop.
No, you're fine. And Samantha, I think that this hopefully is helpful to you because Ethan is so young, and I know the worries that there are. I mean, I think, I don't want to speak for either one of you, you tell me, but you do think about the death of your child every single day. I mean, is the cold going to come today? Is this going to happen today? And you can still be a positive person, but that's always in your mind. It never leaves. But along the same lines, my daughters went on a mission trip to Nicaragua, each of them separately. The doctor said, okay, go for it. Don't play in the mud because there's B. sepaceous, some bacteria in mud that the kids with CF need to avoid, and gave them medications to take with them. And they came home and said, oh, yeah, I played in the mud. They didn't totally listen, but it didn't harm them. So it was a good thing.
Yeah, we try and push for him we want him to do what his siblings do. We want him to have a good life. That's our main thing. We want the memories. It sounds morbid. It sounds like I'm planning, but I feel like we almost have to plan. We have to plan for something. I don't know.
Right. No, it's okay to say it. I think it's realistic to say it.
It is. I know I mourned Margaret when she was first born, and we diagnosed her. I mourned for 2 years. I was in a very deep depression over that. And I had to actually take antidepressants to come out of that depression. because I was mourning the healthy child I thought I was having.
Yeah.
And then I had to learn to adjust to this child that I did have. And I can remember one time she was about 8 months old and she was scooching around furniture, and she put a pair of my sunglasses on, so they're oversized on her face, and she took her enzymes and flipped them up, and now they're all over the place. And I go, oh, darn, now she's going to be cute. I'm going to have to like her. I was just kidding. And that's some of that humor that is kind of Black humor that, you just learn to start laughing a little bit about the absurdity of some of the things that you think of.
Right.
Yeah.
And I do think talking to them age appropriate is something, it sounds like you've done it too, but something we've done all along. You have a disease, explaining what it means. I remember we were doing a fundraiser at the time for CF, and Emily was in, I don't know, first or second grade. She's my drama queen, child number 2. And she was like, great, I get to tell everyone I'm going to die. And, so we've empowered them their whole life. She had to make light of it and be truthful about it. So I don't think it's harmful.
Yeah, we are always really honest with Ethan. He's a very curious, very smart kid, and he's got some tough questions for us. And we answer them, like you said, age appropriately. And so he knows a lot more than probably some other parents would let their kids know, but he's compliant with his treatment so far. I know that could very well change, but he knows the importance. He knows why he has to go to the doctors. He knows all these things. So
you're hitting on a really good point, because children with cystic fibrosis, as they become teenagers, usually become very angry. Mm-hmm. And if you look at Facebook now, and I'm following a few young people that were friends with Maggie or had joined a different organization besides Laura's.
That's okay. We're all one big community. But
that is true. But at any rate, one of the things I did with Maggie to help her learn compliance was give her control. Mm-hmm. She was 9 years old, and she was doing her own medicines. And one of the things that I let her know and let my son know as they were growing up, and I have 2 stepkids, I don't want to forget about them, her job was to do her medications. That was her job. That was her chore. And I explained to all of them, if you count the hours that these kids had to sit, and they've improved it, but it was 45 minutes per inhalation. So when you were healthy and you were doing 3 inhalations a day or 4 inhalations a day, and then taking all of the different medicines, you were investing a great deal of time just being compliant with your medications and the chest therapy and all of that. So as she got older, she had that control over when she did them. And that helped a lot, I think, towards her compliance. And when she was very young, I just want to say this very quickly, I used puppets. And I did everything on the puppet first. And it was Amy and Zach. I had 2 of them. And Amy would talk to Zach and ask all the questions. And Zach had the CF, male. And then he had to try the mask on and everything. And it was so effective.
That is good. And I remember, too, thinking before Molly was diagnosed, when I was pregnant, I thought, oh, this is going to be great. We're going to have, little sandwiches with cucumbers and everything's going to be so healthy. And then you have your kid with CF and they're like, put in a stick of butter, let them eat sundaes, give them a high-fat diet, give them whatever they want. You're like, okay, well, that wasn't what I was thinking, but okay, because they have a hard time keeping weight and gaining weight. And I just remember that whole thing. That was one of the big things for me. I was like, well, that's weird, but okay. And actually, since then, my girls who are very healthy and very active, they've kind of switched their beliefs. They don't really believe that so much about the high-fat diet, but they're just thinking healthy and stay active. And running and working out has been one of the best things, that they can do to keep them healthy.
One of the things is these kids are expensive. Speaking of diet, Maggie would try to become vegan or she would try to become vegetarian. And so everything had to be swapped out of the refrigerator.
My daughter's vegan now, one of them.
Yes.
That's
where
we are. But that's the intestinal problems.
It is.
She's had intense pain for 10 years. She can't eat food. It's the only way she can survive. The pain is horrific. And so... that's one of the biggest things they haven't figured out in the CF community so far.
That's very true. She would go back and forth because her body couldn't sustain the veganism. But, she'd go 8 months with being a vegan and then meat would come into the picture. They're expensive. You have to buy lots of food for these kids.
Right.
I know Ethan will come home from school and he'll tell me what he had for lunch. I had carrot sticks and apple slices, and they had pizza, but I didn't want the pizza. And I'm like, eat the pizza next time.
And that's one of the things I was going to talk about too, about making things work in school. Everyone's decision is right for them and no judgment whatsoever. I know people that have homeschooled their kids. And I do remember when Molly was 2, I mean, I thought about it, geez, all those germs, do I really want her in school? But then I thought, I don't have the patience. I can't homeschool my kids. So we found a school where there are enzymes that they take to digest food that the school would allow her to keep them on her because it's not an altering drug. It's a digestive thing. We ended up having to go private school, but now the public schools do allow it. You don't have to go see a nurse because that would be a distraction. You have to go by the office, pick up your enzymes. And when they're in elementary school, they switch so many classes. So they did allow every classroom to have enzymes in it. So it didn't make them stand out. And that was a good thing.
Yeah, Ethan right now, he has to go to the office for his enzymes. And I think school right now it's been our toughest challenge. He's already been out more days than I can even count because he's in the hospital on IVs and just overall not feeling well. I told his preschool teachers last year that they really spoiled us because they were just so on top of it. We didn't have to worry about anything. And then now going into this elementary school where there's so many more students, it's been so scary, so nerve-wracking. And it's been rough. And he likes school, but I know he's struggling a bit with, I think, the standing out and that because he has to go to the office. If he's not feeling well, he sits out and everybody knows that there's something different. And whenever his port's accessed, he tells them, you have to be careful. Do not touch me. Don't. So I know he feels like he sticks out a bit, but
yeah, it is a long process. I mean, my Emily, she would take her IV pole to school. I mean, you can take some of the IV meds. They're on a ball that you could tuck in in your shirt or something. But at the time, she was flushing herself, with heparin and doing the whole thing at school, pushing her little pump around the hallways and stuff like that.
How old was she?
She was in junior high.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it did seem to work for her. But again, that's empowering them, it gave them ownership of their disease. And I always let them tell the nurses how she wanted to have her blood drawn, or the one nurse that wouldn't count down. She's like, yep, I don't want you. So, you had to just give them whatever power you could.
We homeschooled by choice, not because of Maggie having cystic fibrosis, because we were going to homeschool my son, who was born 3 years earlier, healthy. But one of the things is Maggie was always involved in groups. So she was in the Brownies, she was in Girl Scouts, she was in all those types of activities. And she came home one time from an early activity with other people, and she says they were all looking at me funny when I was taking my enzymes with my food. And I said, well, explain to them what it is. So they actually did a show and tell where they broke open an enzyme and they looked at all the beads and then they threw it away. And, she was able to tell them about cystic fibrosis and educate them. And it was really nice because she felt so good. And then all the kids just kind of, over the years, different kids would come in, but, they would say what's going on. And somebody would say, oh, she's got CF. And, they knew. So they would be able to answer all of that so that standing out wasn't as critical for her in those group situations. So I think that was another way of empowerment.
Yeah.
When she was a teenager, she wanted people to know. She wanted to flash it. She would wear, things like this so her port would show. I'm pulling my blouse down. Where her port was in her chest. And I had to actually tell her, cover up because, we're at a dinner and people don't want to see the bandage and the yellow iodine all around you.
Yeah.
Oh, mother.
Well, yeah, and it is interesting. Definitely, it does changes. It ebbs and flows on what they want to do. What is Ethan? Does he like to share it, or
he does? He will tell anybody anything about his CF. He's very proud of it, which I hope he carries that through the years. I don't want him to be ashamed of who he is, but if he wants to hide it when he's older, that's fine as well.
They get good things when they have CF when they're little. When they're little, they get the Make-A-Wish program, or I don't know if you belong to our organization, which is Cystic Fibrosis Support Network of Michigan.
Yes.
You get a care package as a child, and you're noted on your birthday. So there's different things. You get stickers when you go to the doctors, different rewards when they turn 18. I saw a young man who turned 18, and he was going, what happened to the stickers and the balloons? It changes. It really changes for them when they become adults.
And I think one of the most important things is, as we told our girls, it's up to you if you want someone to know if you have CF. You don't have to share it with them unless you want to. Unfortunately, in college, some people shared it for them, and it came back around like, yeah, she's, the girl who has CF, and one of them just dealt with that again. But, it's an education. It's always just like, hey, you can always ask me. We can talk about anything. And that's one of the things we've done with our girls, too. Again, age appropriate, but we've talked about death. We've talked about, do you want to be cremated? Do you want to be buried? What do you want to do? I don't want anything harboring in your brain that you're obsessing about. So whatever you want to discuss, let's discuss it. It's harder for women with cystic fibrosis to get pregnant. Men are usually sterile, but it does happen. And usually if you get pregnant when you have CF, your disease gets worse. So there's just a lot of factors. And it was just important to let them know on the way, because I met somebody 34 years old, which in this day and age is a late time to be diagnosed, but she was just diagnosed. And I said, you're like a 1-year-old right now, as far as learning that you have CF, because my girls have had their whole lives to digest it. And now you're just learning it. So give yourself a break. It's overwhelming. It's
very overwhelming.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot to learn.
Yeah. And one thing I did too, I think it was my, first therapy, like my foundation's my therapy, but all their clothes, I couldn't throw any of the baby clothes away. So I made king size quilts with them for each girl.
That's nice. I threw them away.
Kim, I love that. Whatever works, right?
Yep.
So that's so good. Well, just wanted to touch on, and this is probably still in the beginning for you because Ethan's only 6 years old, but do you have insurance challenges? Do you have concerns? We have lots of experience in it.
I haven't had any issues. Luckily, he gets Medicaid and he gets Children's Special Health, which has been amazing. So we haven't really had any issues at all. We've been pretty lucky. I know that.
I think that's unique to Michigan, isn't it?
You know what? It is in every state. I initially thought that it was unique to Michigan. Michigan has among the best care for people with CF. And I think it's one of the only states in the country that will give children's special health care to someone 18 and older. Only
because of CF and diseases like that, where
they're living
longer. It used to be thought of as a childhood disease, but they are living into adulthood.
So, and the children's special health care only covers cystic fibrosis care, and it has nothing to do with income, and you can get it if you have other insurance. And when your kids are in college, it's like $120 for the year. So it's a wonderful thing because I used to be worried, well, what if they move out of the state when they're older? Because the co-pays can be outrageous. It's $300,000 per year to cover a healthy child with CF, and the drugs are just thousands and thousands of dollars.
Well, and that's a good thing to touch on too, is that, and we were very fortunate to have insurance the entire time that Maggie was with us. And she chose to get married early. And she also lived in Arizona, in another state, for 10 years. Now, it was very hard. It took her over 4 years to get happy with her healthcare team when she moved to Arizona. So it was a long process. And then, of course, as soon as she was healthy, happy with the healthcare, then she got real sick, and I brought her back to Michigan. But it's a good thing to talk about the healthcare and how hard it is on the children, even if they've got really good health care, just the poking and the prodding that goes on, the diagnosing. They're in the hospital, and like I said, I'm watching, I mentioned earlier, I'm watching 3 girls right now. One's trying to become a lawyer and is attending school in Montana. Great kudos to her. She's pretty healthy. She only had 1 hospitalization this year. She's also from Michigan. And then another one's been in the hospital for over 3 weeks, and she's got another 3 weeks to go. She's very ill. And she's about Maggie's age. She's one who went to the camp with Maggie. And there's another one who had a double lung transplant 2 years ago. And she's in this slow rejection where they're really watching her. And she had actually gotten the job that she always wanted, which was at Disney World. That's her favorite. She'll know who I'm talking about. And had to turn it down because that's when the rejection started. And they don't understand a lot as these kids get older. They don't. When Maggie died, it was from liver disease. It wasn't from cystic fibrosis itself.
Right. It's very difficult. So when we decided to have our second, we asked around to see if there was any way to have a second child without CF. Was there in vitro? Long story short, everyone said there was not. And we had a second child with CF, Emily. Love her, of course. No regrets whatsoever. And it's a 1 in 4 chance with each pregnancy that you would have a child with CF. But Molly had more of the sinus issue. She also had a PICC line. She went skiing with a PICC line in her arm. And Kim, also called the ski hill and said, hey, if she falls, crazy mom on the phone. But, and they were very like, yes, ma'am, we got it. We have her name written down if anything happens. And of course, nothing did. And I did tell Molly later that I did that, but I am getting sidetracked. But yes, so Emily is born and she is the sick kid with the CF. Like Molly's healthier. Emily is, seems to be sick all the time. 8 months old, pneumonia. She's had 11 cases of pneumonia. She missed her 7th grade trip to go to DC. I mean, it is hard. It is hard to have CF. It is hard to be a parent with CF. You have mentally got to get yourself together every single day, And then for them too, I mean, we thought we were going to lose Emily when she was in 7th grade because she has MAC, one of the bacteria in her lungs. So it's very serious, but when you have to build your kid up and, she does is a good thing. You can get depressed. So I recommend whatever child wants to go see a therapist, go see one. It's saving grace for some of them, and it's really helped her a lot. But yeah, it's, and then there's also some guilt on Molly's part, gosh, Emily's always sick. So there's a lot going on.
We had Maggie, she chose, we went to therapy because of Maggie. She chose to go to therapy as a young adult and older. She did have one really, really black, depressing period, and I think she was probably around 14 at the time. And it was over, is anybody going to ever want her, does she ever see a future with a man? That turned out to be nonsense because she was a beautiful woman, and she married a very nice man and was with him for 9 years. So fortunately, the therapist helped her through that. And even as an adult, because even though he was a very nice man, there were marital problems from time to time. And she'd go. And she was just a little smarter than him on the emotional scale, not on the intellectual, but on the emotional. So,
gotcha. Samantha, what are your thoughts now? I'll tell you mine too, but when my daughters, Molly was first diagnosed and then Emily, but what did you think about the cure? What did you think? What was your hope for the future?
I struggle with it. I really do. I mean, I hope there is a cure, but I'm more of a realistic person. And I know that while there may be one eventually, I don't feel like it's in the near future. And I know that's a really dark way to think, but just where I go with it.
Yeah. Right. I would have to agree with you. I've never, and I think it's protection. Mm-hmm. I've never thought there would be a cure in my kid's lifetime. I think the medications are great. I'm hopeful. This phase 3 medications come through for my kids in 90% of the CF population, but my kids definitely can't even go there until they get some sort of pill. And then they still have CF, and there's all the medications they still have to take as well. But yeah, much hope and great medications out there, great work by scientists and researchers. And gosh, I love them all. They're wonderful people. But I'm just hoping for medications to keep them a long life. When my girls were born, their life expectancy was 17, and so they're 24 and 21 now, so they've surpassed that, and today it's about 41 years old.
I truly expected them to have a cure by now. I really did. I always think of myself as a realist, but I was an optimist in this case. And I'm floored that I lost Maggie. I'm absolutely floored. The doctor told her and us at one point, her childhood doctor, that he expected her to live a normal lifespan. And I'm angry that she didn't. I really am. I can joke about it, but I miss her terribly.
Yeah, there's really no words. When I was interviewing Dr. Francis Collins, he said he was shocked. He was shocked that it's been 30 years this year, in July.
Because he was on TV saying, we'll have 1 in 10. I listened.
And then they were like, oh, there's all these mutations. It's more complicated than we thought. And that's science, the beauty and the tragedy of it. So now he's thinking 10 to 20 years, and he's magnificent, but I can't go there with my mind either. I tell my girls, everybody has something. We have CF, we have to deal with it, and we're planning on long lives. And I always say, I'm going to live to be 90. You guys are going to live to be 90. That's my hope. So
I hope that's true for both of you. I really do.
I know.
I think a lot of my issue with not feeling like there's a cure is because Ethan is on so many preventative meds, does all this, and he's still constantly getting sick, in and out of the hospital all the time. And none of those new meds that have come out work for his mutations yet. I think the new one that's in phase 3 might, but that's even up in the air. Even his doctor's not 100% sure if it's something he'll be able to take. I think once I see something that will actually help him better, I think then I'll be a little more optimistic about it. But I really struggle with that part of it, those emotions.
Well, you're in the thick of it too. How old is your son?
He's 6.
Yeah. So you've got a lot of work ahead of you.
Yeah.
And I say that anybody that is thinking of having a child that has cystic fibrosis, I have to tell you, I wouldn't change it for the world. I would not.
Yeah.
So, you can love them and raise them, but it is more work. And Laura said that, everybody has something. That's absolutely true. You just look around. Everybody has something.
Right. We're going to wrap it up, but I also wanted to say that we are very positive women, moms here, and we have a lot ahead of us, a lot behind us. I can remember going to somebody's National Honor Society event, leaving the University of Michigan to drive to go see that event, to get back to the hospital at U of M. Emily had just had a PICC line. It was up in her neck. It didn't go down. I'm like, okay, it's up in your neck. I got to go to this thing. They're going to work on you as soon as I get back. So I left, drove to that, couldn't miss Molly's thing, went to that for 45 minutes. They were in Catholic school. So I said to the priest, Father Proust, I need you to say a prayer. I'm going back to U of M. The PICC line's up in her neck. Got back to U of M. It had gone down. It had flushed down, whatever. But there are so many, PICC line stories. And then when I got home, I remember standing in the rain outside, just sobbing, thinking, oh, this is great. You have your moments. You're still you're just thankful and that, you've made it through that day.
One of the things that people have said to me in the past are, oh, I don't know how you do it. As a mom, I want to say to every single mother out there that loves her children and wanted children, you just do it. You just do it. There's nothing special about the three of us that you wouldn't do.
Exactly.
You have to do it.
Right, absolutely. I just wanted to thank Samantha. You drove very far, and it wasn't exactly the best weather day today. So thanks for coming out from the Flint area.
Thanks for inviting me.
Sure. And Kim, I just wanted to say you're an inspiration to me. It's the worst hell on earth that you've been through and are still going through. It hasn't even been a year yet. And I just have so much appreciation for you. And I thank you for telling your story. And of course, you think about Margaret every second of every day. But thanks for...
No, I don't.
You don't? Okay.
But when I do think of her, I usually cry.
Yes, I understand.
But no, I don't think of her of every second of every day, but thank you. I have to, do things like feed the cats and
Right.
get on with life. And you do that too as a parent.
Exactly. Anything closing you wanted to...
I do want to say that there is concern with attitudes on the medical community. I just want to throw that out there and say that, one of the things that really bothered Margaret, and your daughters may see this and your son later, where they are getting a mindset that the people with cystic fibrosis just want medications like the opioids, things like that. And Laura, you brought up earlier, there's a lot of pain associated with it that they don't understand. And so to have a negative attitude like that is really a concern for me as a parent. And it was for my daughter.
A good point. Yeah, absolutely. I know I can't say everything medically my kids are doing, but I know that they don't want to rely on any kind of pain meds.
She didn't
it's
need
not
it for
their
the last
choice.
2 years.
Right. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying it's definitely not the mindset. Well, we're just going to wrap it up. We've just touched the surface here, I feel like, but it's been fantastic to get to know both of you, Kim and Samantha, a little bit and to meet in person. Thank you both for coming in and talking about your lives with cystic fibrosis.
Thank you.
Yep,
Thank you very much.
This has been the Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast app so you don't miss an episode. For more information and to learn more about the Bonnell Foundation, check us out online at thebonnellfoundation.org. That's the BONNELL foundation.org. Or follow us on social at the Bonnell Foundation.